Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Prajajanaranjana Yasodanandana Prajajanaranjana Munatira Vanachari Munatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunjabihari Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Go Premanandi Haribo Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So we're continuing the chapter entitled Gajendra's Prayers of Surrender. So it's Canto 8, Chapter 3, and the text today is text 18. Chant responsibly. Atmatma Japta Griha Vita Yeshu Shaktair Dushprapanya Guna Sangha Vivar Chitaya Mukhatma Bi Swahirdaya Paripavitaya Gyanatmane Bhagavate Nama Ishvarya Atmatma Jap Tap Griha Vita Ganeshu Shaktair Dusprapanaya Guna Sangha Vivar Jitaya Mukhatma Bi Swahirdaye Paripavitaya Gyanatmane Bhagavate Nama Ishvaraya Atmatma Jap Tap Griha Vita Ganeshu Shaktar Dusprapanaya Guna Sangha Vivajitaya Mukhatma Svahirtaye Paripavitaya Gyanatmane Bhagavate Nama Ishvaraya Please chant. Atmatma Chapta Griha Vitagani Shakte Dushprapanaya Guna Sangha Vivajitaya Mukhatma Svahirtaye Charipavintaya Gyanatmane Bhagavate Nama Ishvaraya Atmatma Japta Kriha Vitaganeshu Shaktair Dushprapanaya Gunasanga Vivajitaya Mukhatma Svahirtaye Paribhavaitaya Gyanatmane Bhagavate Nama Ishvaraya Atmatma Japta Kriha Vitaganeshu Shaktair Dushprapanaya Gunasanga Vivajitaya Mukhatma Svahirtaye Paribhavitaya Gyanatmane Bhagavate Nama Ishvaraya Atmatma Gyapta Krihavitsa Janeshu Shakta Dusprapanaya Gunasanga Vivajitaya Mukhatma Svahirtaye Prabhivavitaya Gyanatmane Bhagavate Nama Ishvaraya Okay. So here's the word for word. Atma, the mind and body. Atmagya, sons and daughters. Apta, friends and relatives. Griha, home, community, society, and nation. Vita, wealth. Ganeshu, Ganeshu, various servants and assistants. Shaktai, by those who are too attached. Dushprapanaya, unto you, who are very difficult to achieve. Gunasanga, by the three modes of material nature. Vivajitaya, who are not contaminated. Mukta, Atmabhihi, by persons who are already liberated. Svahirdaya, within the core of the heart. Paribhavitaya, unto you, who are always meditated upon. Jnana Atmane, the reservoir of all enlightenment. Bhagavate, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Namaha, I offer my respectful obeisances. Ishvaraya, unto the Supreme Controller. Okay, so the translation. My Lord, those who are completely freed from material contamination always meditate upon you within the core of their hearts. You are extremely difficult to attain for those like me who are too attached to mental concoction, home, relatives, friends, money, servants, and assistants. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, uncontaminated by the modes of nature. You are the reservoir of all enlightenment, the Supreme Controller. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Purport. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes into the material world, he is unaffected by the modes of material nature. This is confirmed in Ishopanishad, Apapa Vidham. He is not contaminated. The same fact is described here, Guna Sangha Vivajitaya. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears as an incarnation within this material world, he is unaffected by the modes of material nature, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 9:11. Avijananti mamudha manusum tanum ashiritam. Foolish men with insufficient knowledge deride the personality of Godhead, because he appears just like a human being. Therefore, the Supreme Personality of Godhead can be understood only by the Muktatma, the liberated soul. Muktat mabihi svahirdaye paribhavitaya. Only the liberated person can constantly think of Krishna. Such a person is the greatest of all yogis. Yoginam api sarvesham mat gatenantaratmana Shraddhavan bhajate yomam samme yuktatamo mataha. Of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. Bhagavad Gita 6:47. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, Gajendra's continuing in his prayers of surrender. And in this particular prayer, he's making a generalization, and the generalization is the following. He says, "My Lord, those who are completely freed from material contamination always meditate upon you within the core of their hearts." So there's a category of persons, those that are free from material impurity. So this means that they are liberated from a kind of infection that's there. It's described that the way of being or the way of acting or even the way of doing is according to innate disposition or even innate tendencies. And these are according to one's material nature. So there's a category of persons that are liberated from this kind of functioning. So we see the position of these liberated persons just by understanding that they're not subject to all this kind of functioning that's coming from just innate tendencies or based on material nature. So if we, on the other hand, look at the position of Krishna, because that's what seems to be necessary according to the way Gajendra has expressed this generalization, we can see that something that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur points out, Krishna is separate from all activities and their causes. And he's able to be separate in this kind of way because of his inconceivable spiritual strength. So, but at the same time, he actually is present and he's involved in the activities of, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur puts it, the activities of Vaikuntha, the activities of all living entities, and the material world. So I'm drawing from the Krishna Samhita, where Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is describing this particular position of Lord Krishna. So now, when we speak of Krishna being personally present, we speak of his being present in spiritual activities. So that's the important distinction to make. Presence doesn't imply just a broad presence. It's a very specific presence in relation to specific spiritual activities. So now, because the first part we were describing the position of the liberated souls, and we were describing the position of Krishna, we're going to look at a connection that happens between the activities of living entities and Krishna. So I'm going to read a verse. Again, I'm drawing from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So naturally, I'm not a Bengali speaker, so I'm sure there's a fantastic way of pronouncing this, but I'll proceed. Chitkaryeshu Swayam Krishno Yade Yagneshvara Puja Jivet Tu Paramat Makaha sarva karma phala prada. So the translation is, he's present as super soul in all living entities. He's present as Yagneshvara in the material world. He alone rewards the results of all activities. So here's that connection that's there between living entities and Krishna. He's the one who's awarding the results of the activities performed by living entities. So there's an additional connection, according to the statement of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and that connection is that living entities worship Krishna as Yagneshvara, meaning he's the beneficiary of all sacrifices in this material world. So he alone is the one who's going to be rewarding the living entities for their activities. And also he's the recipient of any sacrifice that's been performed in the material world. As a result, that's the activity of which he's the recipient. So Krishna gives some insight into his awarding the result of activities, because he explains it this way. This divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Daivihi esha gunamayi mam maya durantaya mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. So it's the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is the one who's awarding the results of being able to overcome this infection of having a way of being, a way of doing something according to one's innate tendencies or innate disposition. So this is material nature, this innate disposition, or these innate tendencies, because it's behavioral patterns, both gross and subtle. And one can't be released from those entrenched patterns because it's a kind of illusory energy that's under Krishna's control. So, but because it's under his control, he can order the release of the soul from this insurmountable energy. So one doesn't usually think that there's anything at fault with, innate tendencies or an innate disposition, but the problem is that it gets into, I heard one psychologist describe it as like nerve pathways get set up, and the same behavior, be it on a subtle level, like a certain thought pattern, it's the thinking gets accustomed to going down that channel. That channel's being created. So you leave the mind and it'll go down that channel, the known path. The same thing with external behaviors, and it can be in interactions with others. And I've noticed this myself with meeting persons who don't have spiritual practices. I notice one will have exactly the same conversation with that particular person. It can be this year, it can be 3 years ago, it can be 5 years ago. It was the same conversation. And why? It's these set behavioral patterns. And sometimes it's amusing, and one thinks, haven't I heard this before? And indeed one has. It's Srila Prabhupada's term, the conditioning, those learned patterns. So it's a very intense thing. It's a kind of energy that is Krishna's energy, and he's controlling that. He keeps it going like that. So, and is considered insurmountable energy. So, Gajendra here, he's referring to those persons that Krishna has had be released from that insurmountable energy. It's called illusory energy, uh, where persons are functioning according to the innate tendencies, their regular disposition, thinking it's reality. Persons are thinking this is reality. So there's a nice logic that's applied to explain Krishna's presence in the heart of such souls that are liberated from these influences. So this is how Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur states it. So usually you have to present some logic to explain something. So this is how he presents it. Some people say that the Supreme Lord is omnipotent. Therefore, he may sometimes incarnate by his inconceivable energy in a material body. And all incarnations are therefore can be accepted simply as historical incidents. According to the swan-like opinion of swan-like Vaishnavas, this statement is extremely unreasonable because it is impossible for Lord Krishna to accept material bodies and perform material activities. Such action would be insignificant and abominable for him. But his appearance and pastimes in the hearts of the realized living entities are accepted by both the sadhus and Krishna. So notice the contrast he's making. The one platform of, seeing that Krishna, he is omnipotent, he's able to incarnate, but he's incarnating in a material body. This is what some people say, as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says. But that's considered sort of abominable because the whole discussion here, and it's something Gajendra is bringing up, is that there's a special category of persons that are freed from that illusory energy of Krishna. And that illusory energy of Krishna is all connected to the material plane, both the material body, the subtle body that's like the mind, which is still very material. And here, on the other hand, to say that Krishna would be taking on such a material body, it's abominable, as he puts it. So this particular text can be found in Sri Brahma's Krishna Samhita. So we find that Srila Prabhupada, one of those swan-like Vaishnavas that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur points to, is that he says that when Lord Krishna comes into this material world, he's unaffected by the modes of material nature. So not only is it impossible for Lord Krishna to accept a material body and to perform material activities, but also he's not affected by the modes of nature. So he's not caught up in these stuck patterns, that we're talking about. It's not, Krishna doesn't have to go into such a body and then be subjected to these stuck little patterns that are all like, keep a person very tightly controlled and not able to move left or right. It's that very set pathways. So it doesn't make sense. He's not affected in that kind of way. So now Krishna himself, he categorizes people with this opinion. He puts it this way: fools deride me when I descend in the human form. And he explains his particular nature, which is not that nature which is subject to those behavioral patterns or according to innate tendencies. He says, they do not know my transcendental nature as the Supreme Lord of all that be. So Krishna is described as Satchitananda Vigraham. Your form is transcendental, full of knowledge, bliss, and eternality. So this is from Bhagavad Gita 9:11 purport. Srila Prabhupada quotes from one of the Vedic texts. So going back to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he puts it this way: the pure activities of Lord Krishna have been perceived through the samadhi of swan-like persons like Vyasadeva. Krishna's activities are not exactly like those of people under the clutches of Maya, because Krishna's activities are not limited to any time or place, nor are his activities comparable to those of ordinary people. And it's interesting because this particular text from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur then leads into his writing various chapters, very short little verses that describe an entire pastime, one after the other, of Lord Krishna. And just like in 2 lines, he'll cover an entire pastime. So the entire Krishna book, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, covers in this kind of way. So one can understand that this is what's been spoken about here by him, that Krishna's activities, they're actually being perceived through samadhi. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is perceiving those activities within the heart. So one may ask the question, how is it that the activities of Krishna can be perceived through samadhi of these swan-like persons? It's an interesting thing. One wants to know, how does it happen? So Srila Sutta Goswami, he explains it. This is earlier on in the Bhagavatam, in the 1st canto, in the 2nd chapter, the 19th verse. He says, as soon as loving, irrevocable service is established in the heart, the effect of nature's modes of passion and ignorance, such as lust, desire, and hankering, disappear from the heart. Then the devotee is established in goodness, and he becomes completely happy. So that's something of the process put in one sentence. So it's a stage of perfection or self-satisfaction, and it's transcendental to material existence. And so certain things are disappearing as devotional service becomes fixed in a person. And those things are activities that are the effects of those behavioral patterns. Those things that result from these innate tendencies, they start to disappear. So goodness then becomes established, and the devotee is making further progress to rise to the position of unmixed goodness. So this is the stage at which the devotee can see Krishna face to face. So that's the particular statement of Gajendra's here of the persons that are completely freed from material contamination, who are always meditating upon Krishna within the core of their hearts. So Gajendra is contrasting this state of existence of this category of persons with one who's too attached to mental concoction, home, relatives, friends, money, servants, and assistants. And we find that similar thoughts are expressed by Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, because he's looking at attachments in the mind I often refer to Srila Raghunath Das Goswami because it's so helpful. So he prays at one time, O mind, please reside in Vraja and earnestly worship Lord Krishna, the lifter of Govardhan Hill. Fervently pray to him and with utter humility to please him. Surely he will shower his causeless mercy upon a despicably deceitful soul like me. So this prayer came to my mind as somewhat connected to Gajendra's prayer, because there's this matter that the soul is coming into contact with a pattern that may be ignorant or which brings dishonesty and even some darkness. So the soul can come into contact with such a pattern, and Sri Raghunath Das Goswami's sort of giving some clue of this going on, or that he's experiencing or has experienced. So this sort of a playing out of a pattern is what causes one to distance oneself from one's original spiritual consciousness. And this is the kind of honesty that Gajendra is revealing here, because he's concerning himself with asking to go past those attachments. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that the realizing of one's true position is to feel humbler than grass and simultaneously take shelter of the holy name. And this is what brings the grace to all saintly personalities. So Gajendra's praying in that kind of mood of surrender, and he's asking Lord Krishna for the fulfillment of his prayers, but on Krishna's terms. That's the beauty of Gajendra's prayer. So he's understanding, what's the ideal position, and he's also understanding something of his own position. And the mood is just one of surrender, very much like Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, starting to see oneself in a very humble position. And that's how Gajendra is viewing himself. And he's asking Lord Krishna to fulfill his prayer, but on Krishna's terms. So those were some shorts. It was a little, what would be the word? Not going into the super details of it. But that was something that came from reading this verse. I don't know if anybody has a particular thought to share.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for your class. You mentioned a point that I think we all can relate to. You were mentioning when you hear someone repeat the same conversation like a year over. Of course, we probably also repeat the same conversation that people's annoyed by us too. Probably like you're saying the same thing. And I kind of can relate to that because just recently, like yesterday, one of my friends, he had the same struggle we're going with, like the same conversation I've had with him many years, and that basically my life is not working out, like Gajendra basically. And I guess you could argue, if we argue that if Gajendra was having a conversation with the crocodile, you come back next year, you're like, you're still having this conversation with the crocodile? Because it's explained that he went through this whole thing with Gajendra for 1,000 years. Next year we come back, you have the same. So my question is basically regarding compassion and mercy, because we may criticize people and may have the conception that they're not making any advancement, but if Gajendra was going through 1,000 years of let's say the same conversation, that doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't making any progress. And we also go through the same thing. People may hear the same conversation with us, and maybe the only reason we maybe have gotten out of that depression is because somebody was merciful to us to tolerate our same, stuff over again. So how can we develop that sense of, not judging or having this type of mercy towards others, that maybe actually they are making advancement. We can't see everything Krishna's maybe having tolerate this, going through this suffering for a particular reason, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not making any advancement. So how do we develop this? Because in the end, it comes back to us. We also need that mercy sometimes too. So maybe you could elaborate on those points. The question wasn't really clear, but maybe you could expand on that.
So I'm understanding the question is one may be having the same conversation with somebody indeed, and somebody sometimes also is having to tolerate ourselves. And you wondering how is it that one can actually not be judgmental of a person perhaps having that same conversation, and also develop tolerance oneself. So it's being judgmental is generally the mind projects. So something that one is doesn't like in oneself, that one recognizes something in one's own mind, some particular tendency, and one would prefer not to look at it. Because it's very hard confronting, some unpleasant tendency. So rather than confront it, one looks externally for signs of that tendency in others. And that's when the judgment comes. The judgment is more one is actually not very happy about having that tendency in oneself. But it's much easier to look externally and, there's that tendency over there. I'm going to slash that person because that person has that tendency. It's more rather one needs to bring the energy, the thinking back to oneself and examine, why is this so abhorrent to me? Why am I casting judgment on this particular behavior or this particular pattern? Rather, let me turn my attention. This must be something within myself that I need to look at. And indeed, that's usually the case. It's just it's very difficult to confront something in oneself, especially because one understands it. So many things are so entrenched. One actually has a kind of safety from staying even with bad habits or bad patterns of behavior. So it becomes easier not to be judgmental when one just bears in mind that principle that actually, if I'm looking outward for those errors, it means it's an error in or some problem internally or something that I need to look at internally, and I'm just avoiding it. Better that I turn my attention internally. Then the judgment goes away, because the minute one actually does that, then one's beginning to root out some of that deception that's allowing one to function as though the problem is there, not here. Or even if you don't term it problem, there's some tendency that one's not happy with. So it needs examination. So the judgment goes away. But one needs to take that step and understand that. So, and in terms of being tolerant of others, not difficult again, because one understands they're also suffering. They're also caught up in those various tendencies that have been learned, got entrenched. So, as a friend, it's always much better to remind a person, oh, you're going down that route. Remember, that's not where you want to go. Try and move it this way. So, one tries to perform that service when one can, because it's always easier to help somebody else, because it's easier to see somebody else's patterns rather than one's own. So, and if one has a close relationship with somebody, it's always possible to remind the person, oh, don't go down that road, remember? Rather try and change that. So it's positive all round.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krsnarcana Mataji. What is the heart?
Okay. Okay. What is the heart? Okay. This is a very significant question because this very discussion rested on a group of liberated persons carrying Krishna within the heart and actually seeing all his pastimes within the heart. So the question is, what is this heart? What is this place where Krishna can be carried, this place where his pastimes can be enacted? Sometimes the heart is equated with the mind. So it's the place where thoughts are happening. It's a place where feelings are arising. And it's also the place where the will to do something or not to do something is present. So the category of persons that are in this position of having their heart be the residence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are those who've aligned all their thinking, all their feelings, and all their willing in that relationship. So it's the place, most intimate connection with the supremacy of Godhead. It's the place where one in that liberated stage, as I understand it, is completely in line also with the thinking, the feelings, and the willing of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's no discord whatsoever. There's complete alignment. It's a rather extraordinary state of the soul, the actual self, being freed from what would normally be a place that's filled with just those learned patterns of thought, those learned feelings, those a willing that may even be extremely selfish. So that's why that statement of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that if that's the residence of that kind of existence, it cuts one off from spiritual consciousness. So the heart needs to open. It needs to make that connection that goes beyond those patterns, and that connection needs to be made with the Supreme Personality of Godhead through His holy name. So when that connection is made, then the super soul that's residing there is coming to expose those patterns, those innate tendencies to the entity, the self, that soul, And so with each exposure, it becomes the duty of the particular entity to try to root out anything that's deceptive, that's not in line with Krishna's desires or in line with his will. And naturally, that gets externalized through the instructions that, strike one, or the devotees delivering particular messages to one. So one needs to keep trying to align, and at the same time, root out anything that's deceptive, that appears to be that one's in line with Krishna's desire, but in actual fact, one isn't. One has to actually constantly look at that and correct it. And so finally, it becomes this extraordinarily brilliant, effulgent residence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where one's actually, it's described, seeing Krishna face to face there, or seeing his pastimes being enacted. I mean, you have the, like Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, often Srila Prabhupada's quoting him, where he'll actually give a whole conversation of, oh, and then Krishna said this, and this gopi said that, because he's actually hearing and seeing that. It's exact. He's able to, and it's that complete alignment with Krishna's thinking, his feelings, his willing. But at the same time, there's the independence. One is interacting. So that's how I'm sort of understanding and attempting to answer your big question. And if you have some thoughts you'd like to share.
I could ask another question. I suppose in the spirit world, then there's no room for forgetting Krishna and having tendencies outside of Krishna's will and outside these transcendental feelings. In the spirit world, there is no need for maybe an individual heart, so to speak. Like the heart is this place where Krishna resides while we're here in the material world. Yet even when we are really liberated and to associate with Krishna, even that is left behind. Do you see what I'm saying?
Jani Tagore Hari, what I'm understanding is you seeing that the physical heart as such is left behind if one is transferred to the spiritual world. So in some sense, you're saying it doesn't seem like heart features in the spiritual world. Is it like that?
Yeah, like it's difficult to comprehend because in the heart it's very, like, we have intelligence, false ego, and the 5 elements, and then there's heart. And you explained it in a way that's very nice, which I can't re-articulate, though it left me with the question that in the material world, yes, we have very clear there's this heart, and that's where all these things are taking place, like anartas, and there's the samskaras, and when we're fully pure, then Krishna is residing there, and we're really able to see Krishna face to face, right? Well, in the spiritual world, we are seeing Krishna face to face as spirit soul. Like, I guess we are here as well, but here we're in this kind of heart. But so anyway, those were some thoughts that went through my mind.
Well, the experience here is supposed to be none different to being in the spiritual world if one's in that liberated state. And the reason for that is that the whole consciousness is purely conscious of Krishna. The consciousness is not at all to even the subtle body, or the subtle body has fallen away. So the mind as it was, those patterns has fallen away. The ego has fallen away. It's not that one's now got that, all those ideas about who one is in relation to those patterns in the mind. So that's all fallen away. So you could say the subtle body is basically dissolved. And the intelligence is aligned with the will of moving in the direction of Krishna. So the intelligence is assisting in the correct way. So the, one's giving up, or the subtle body is dissolved with that complete self-realization. So it's the soul that little spark that has all that knowledge and that those feelings now, and it's completely aligned with Krishna. So there's no disparity and no necessity for an external expression of what would be that pattern in the mind showing itself in the form of a gross body. And gross even in terms more subtle, but the mind or the ego, that's not necessary anymore. So it makes sense that we just fall away. So that heart part, the soul part, is the part that leaves. Now it's not having that external encumbrance. I don't know how else to put it. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai.